Hey, everybody, welcome out. This is our very first public AI think tank, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm coming in live from Seattle, and it's 8 a.m. here, and we have Gerry Chng with us today, coming in live from Singapore, and it's 11 p.m. there. And we're lucky to have you, and I'm just excited to be here to talk about a lot of pressing matters that a lot of us have on our minds. And I know that you have a lot of involved in experience in helping people through some of this. So I've been following you for quite some time. Okay, so everybody, so Gerry is an executive director in Deloitte's cyber risk advisory practice, specializing in cyber security and risk management. He has over 25 years of experience in cybersecurity and has spent the last 21 years advising clients on how to adopt technology innovations in a safe and controlled environment. He is experienced in serving clients in the government and public sector, financial services, and power and utilities in Singapore and across the Southeast Asia region. So welcome aboard, Gerry. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so tell us about what you've been doing here recently and how things are going out there.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things in the last 12 months was really this whole uptick around AI governance. I've been working on this area for the last 2 to 3 years. And prior to more recent times, it was really a lot about creating the market awareness around what needs to be done to develop technology responsibly. In the last 12 months, we have seen really, the increased uptake of the interest in the area, and people are really starting to look into the governance aspects with the EU AI Act recently being put in force as well. Well, it is still, a little bit more ways before it is actually enacted. But a lot of people are starting to look at the ramifications of regulations like this, because that's amongst the countries, that's one of the first few that has really taken a harder stance towards regulations.
Mhm.
A lot of the countries have taken a more soft law approach to it. So that's really started to get into people's minds around the things that needs to be done. But it's not an easy topic to address. And I'm sure, over the course of the next hour or so, we will be talking quite a lot about the challenges around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's many challenges here as well, like on all sides. And that's to be expected with any emerging technology, and especially something so profound and
Mm.
far-reaching. This isn't, it's hard to compare, there's no true analog to this. And I've had many analogies come up in my mind, like, oh, it's like the electric drill versus the hand crank bore, like it's enhancing jobs, it's saving people from certain things. But I think, there's also the fact that it can do things that humans can't do to a certain degree, and that superhuman ability that it has to quickly derive something and find like fraud detection, and things used to detect in fintech, different applications involved there. So yeah, there's a vast array of opportunities now that weren't really available before. But it's clunky sometimes, and it's expensive, and it's not perfect, and there's no true AI agent out there yet. There's no, things like tools like Devin, okay, where people thought, hey, this is going to be doing your coding for you, and that was a wonderful demo video they had. And you have to, schedule to try things out with people, things that work are usually just available and easy to use, and you can try it out, and then you find the limits. I know a lot of cohorts of mine and friends, we've all tried out a lot of these tools just to simply write code, okay, and get it to do things. And there's a lot that you can accomplish, but it takes so much work. And then even when you get it in place, things can change. And there are always exceptions and hidden bugs in the way these kind of things work. So there is a lot to consider. And that's the other part of the worry, is just as much potential opportunity as what we are seeing right now. There's just as much reason to be very careful.
Mm.
And from beyond ethics, even, just things messing up. I mean, like the airline company that was very unfortunate with their chatbot getting them into trouble. so things like that are, there's a lot of technical concern, but the ethical concern is far more important, honestly. And because if you put both of those things together and one's unethical and one doesn't work quite right, that's the recipe for disaster on all sides. So what are you seeing right
Yeah,
now in
yeah.
this?
Actually, that's quite an interesting observation, right, on a few points, and it is a very big topic to try to unpack, and I don't think we will be able to cover all aspects of it. One of the things you have brought up was fundamentally around that premise that we have seen such revolutions before, or you can look at it as technology changing, and the world has kind of really gotten better as a result of it historically. So that's one possible argument around that. And to a large extent, I think that is true. To your point around the responsible development of it, as well as the ethical aspects, there are some nuances that I think really warrants a deeper conversation around, is it really going to be the same? Or do we need to do something to catalyze that change to effectively allow us to adopt this technology in a better way? I'll just pick a few talking points around this. The first and foremost, which you have highlighted, was really around the types of tools that we have had access to. And one of the key differences in AI as we know it today is really the whole probabilistic nature of it. It's never fully accurate. And that's by the way that it's designed. It was never meant to be deterministic. It's not what it is. And that's where, one of the mindset changes that I do tend to see people struggling with is that we have been used to technology that's very deterministic in nature. When you put in certain inputs, you expect that whatever the computer gives us, it has to be correct because the algorithms behind it is deterministic. But with AI, that's where in the first few months of adoption, we have started to see a lot of mishaps happening, whether it's about sending out sensitive information, relying on information which was not accurate and correct. And that's where people started then wrapping their heads around, you mean it can be wrong? And that's where now you start seeing a lot of the technology having very clear indications in there about whether it's citations where it came from,
Yeah.
warning users about the hallucinations, etc. So there's one aspect where the mindset shift has not really happened yet. So if you look around some of the regulations or the guidance that the world has been coming up with, there's one recurring theme which was always about AI literacy. And I think that's an important aspect where AI used to be something within a data science community. It has grown outside of that in the
Right.
hands of people who may not be comp science trained, but now I have this tool that helps me. They may not fully understand the limitations of what it is. So I think two parts needs to come in together: the training of the broader population to use the tools properly, as well as better ways of designing interfaces to communicate to the users what are they actually dealing with, the transparency aspects of it. So that's
Mhm.
one angle of kind of looking at that.
Mhm.
There are probably also some other aspects around the concerns about displacements, and that's one of the recurring theme that's always been coming up. One of the key things that's been quite on my mind as well is what needs to be done from a policy level to be able to encourage organizations to do the right thing, to redesign the jobs. Because once you have this massive productivity gains, you really have two spectrums that you can try to adopt. One spectrum is, of course, to say, now I have capabilities to do more with the same number of people. Uh, I can increase my market share, but that's not so straightforward because it takes a lot of, coming up with new strategies. The different engines within your organization needs to fire up in a very different way. An
Mhm.
easier approach is to say, I maintain the same output, but now I do it with lesser people. So we have seen this over the last few months, massive cuts in organizations because either they are repivoting to new skills with AI, or they feel that they no longer need that many people in the same job function. So what happens to this group of people who are then displaced? So this is where the complications do come in, that I believe over time we will find that new equilibrium, but some catalyst needs to be put in to essentially make that change happen. It doesn't happen by default. So those are, I think, largely I agree with some of the premises people have been putting up, that we have seen such changes before. It's just we need to very proactively do something to make sure that we take care of a lot of the disruptions and the changes that's happening.
That's right. And along with that, I mean, if this is prematurely deployed in certain situations, you're going to have okay, so they've let some employees go at a company and they've automated a lot of the bulk of their tasks, but that goes sideways. And then who's managing that? And the people who knows their job better than the people with the job itself. And so I think it would be, the right thing to do to have it enhance their job by giving them more capability, and then they're managing that and they're overseeing that, because it's old thinking to think that AI is just going to replace something, when in fact, or this new tool, no matter what it is, in this case, it's AI, but it doesn't just replace or enhance something, but it allows new possibilities. And, all of a sudden it's a casual affair to review something that's been assembled from a few hundred documents, and you're not the one assembling it, but therein lies the technical, route that it takes to get there. And a lot my my cohorts and myself have spent many weeks talking about how do we, like retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, when you take data and a corpus of data and it has been placed into a vector database in such a way where it can find sentiment and summary in this in such a way, it's kind of like metadata for people out there. It's not really a keyword search, but it is, tokenized word related. And how is it coming up with this? How is it indexing it in a way to find it? How do you know if that's accurate? And there's a lot of exceptions to that. And as we have built our projects, we have found there's always more than one way to do something. But sometimes it's difficult from all approaches, and you have to sit there and go, okay, what's the best way to, chunk this data and take something that's so big that we've got to break it down into something smaller and understand it. Well, part of safe and effective AI is the accuracy in that, and that's where people can become statistics of a system that doesn't quite function, in the world, and that's how a program can, mess up a few things or a lot of things in a big way, because of these inconsistencies. And so it's such a new art form. At the same time, like, databases have been around for a long time, but not all of this has been evolving behind the scenes. I mean, this started with a perceptron, okay, many decades ago, but now, and many decades later, it didn't make a lot of progress until, what did you have? OCR, optical character recognition. And then as time has gone on, we've had like, predictive text, and and the back end of things, machine learning and neural networks have helped us figure out how to best build something physical. And so, like Wi-Fi antennas, like what a lot of people may or may not know, it's called the Yaji antenna. And it's just a really weird spaghetti knot of wire antenna that you would never think would be this rational, effective antenna that it is. But they used a deep network, deep learning and a neural network to figure this shape out. And it was the most efficient. It was maximized. Okay. And then here you've used machine learning and neural networks to create a product. Now it's out of the picture. You don't need any of that neural network anymore. You've got this device. Okay. But here we are using natural language to interface with computer software in a way that's a little further beyond Siri or Alexa, and or anything like that. And there's plenty of things to come too that we haven't seen yet, that are evolving, that are gonna also take over. And so, and of course, we'll see these worlds grow around us, but the way we get there is going to be very challenging, and it is going to take every bit of thoughtful practice along the way, and the things that I know you have so much experience with in mitigating these types of risks down the line. But it starts with a foundation, okay, and it needs to start with an ethical approach, not just, hey, let's focus on this technicality and this, making it work. That's great, and that's half of it. But if it's premature, if it's not prudent, then there's going to be problems. And
Yeah.
so how do you feel about, just in general, just the security of a lot of companies you're working with? What is there a trend right
Mm.
now? What would you say?
Yeah, maybe I'll start this with that topic around how do we build some of these solutions in a more ethical manner. And I think this is a topic that I have kind of been thinking quite a bit about over the last few years. And one of the things that I have gravitated towards is it was always a very fluffy term. When people talk about, let's be ethical in the way that we are doing it. When we start looking at AI systems and we say, let's put in governance aspects of it, people struggle to do something practical around it because of the very fact that it is a very broad technology.
Oh
When
yeah.
we start looking at AI, there are different categories of it, right? You have mentioned things around whether it's machine learning, and in more recent times, we have had a lot of very consumer level applications of in artificial intelligence as well. So one of the things is really context becomes very important. Rather than talking about ethics from a very broad point of view, I think we need to narrow it down to be able to be very specific around what does this solution do? What are the things that can go wrong with it? And within that context of what it's trying to do, what is the impact and implication to end users, then that's where we can start thinking about things in a more specific way of how to deal with it. I was recently writing an article for the Singapore Computer Society as well. We have this body of knowledge around AI ethics and governance. I was writing a chapter around human-centric AI, and that was to solve a very specific problem amongst the very broad AI governance topics around it. And it's around this whole issue around, as a consumer using and interfacing with AI systems, do I know what I'm looking at? That's the problem that I was trying to define when I was writing about that human-centric AI. I came across quite a few pieces of research materials that really was quite useful in illuminating a little bit about this thinking. Ben Schneiderman wrote a book called Human-Centered AI. In it, he argued that one of the key assumptions that we have always made is that automation versus human control is a single dimension, right? It's mutually exclusive. The more you automate, the less you have human control. So he argued in his book that it is actually it can be viewed as a two-dimensional challenge. You still can have, so in the case of GPTs, for example, I like extensions on my browser that helps me summarize the PDFs that you were talking about. But it doesn't mean that if I have a solution that does that, I lose complete control over what comes out of it and
Right.
what do I do with it.
Mm.
And that's where the UX portions come into it. So there are a few other materials that extend on his work as well. There's a book that looks at building human-centric UX. Google and Microsoft also have some very good guidance around how do you build UX to properly communicate in a transparent and clear manner what the user is actually looking at. So if we look at the broad problems of AI governance, when we narrow it down to what is a problem I'm trying to solve, rather than trying to create a general, framework that tries to address everything, which is very fluffy,
Yeah.
I think we are then able to do something which is quite a lot more specific. If I use another example, in New York City, they came up with a local law 144, which is for the automated employment decision tools. So if HR uses AI solutions, either for the screening of CVs, for performance management, they clearly defined what are the problems. The problems is about discrimination. They then defined certain metrics that needs to be independently audited on an annual basis. So does it try to solve a very broad problem around robustness, explainability? I think they then took a very sensible approach to say, in the context of HR systems using AI, this is a problem that we're worried about, and this is what we want you to do. So I think the thinking around, this broad thing about where should we start if we are trying to think about AI governance, I think we have to really narrow it down. Broad frameworks are
Mhm.
helpful. I'm not saying
Yes.
that they are
Yes.
not, but that framework should then be just guiding us on the things that we need to think about. But in the actual risk assessments, thinking about the things that needs to be implemented to address the risk, it has to be taken in context. So that's some of the thinking that I've been having around this area.
Right. It can be very tricky with biases in data.
Yep.
I mean, it's just less is more sometimes. And in this case, I feel like excluding variables allows them to just focus on the skills and not look at all the other factors that can really skew, what could be good results. And then someone gets missed. Even if you have a human in the loop, which ultimately there is deciding. And but you're using AI to filter and sort through a list of candidates, and if then that has to work right too. So even if you say, oh well, we're using humans in the loop, but how's the tool working that's getting all that to you? And even if you have sound judgment and good character, I mean, it's still doing things for you in the background. It's just like trusting a search online. There's still something you're missing. There's always something out there. None of that's going to be perfect. And I think that 99% accuracy would be amazing, right? We all want 100, but that's not going to happen. 99 would be amazing. It would be incredible, but that's probably not going to happen either. And that would be sporadic at best. But, um, I think that what if we just, avoided it there? Maybe that's not a great place for AI right away. And there's plenty of other things to focus on, like knowledge bases and really working with the data and bridging that to the world of data science and bringing that back into the fold because that's powerful. And data is the new oil for companies, but the moment you start using it for all the everyday purposes, you got to find out where it's really going to fall short of, and definitely, in some cases pretty horribly. But anyway, yeah. So that's been one of my thoughts too. It's like, great, you've got a human in the loop, but how accurate is the tool that's getting it to them? Bridging the gap. And that's just a big concern with all technologies.
Yeah,
Wherever it's used, you're going to say, well, they just cross your fingers. How could you sleep at night, with certain deployments? So it's rigor, it's due diligence every step of the way. And there's no easy way out. AI isn't going to solve its own problem for us. There's that would be great, right? And it does help, it does reprompt itself. There are some incredible things you can do with it. You can retrain other models with more advanced AI or LLM models and whatnot. There's a lot of things you can do out there, but it's just not perfect. And you have to verify all that mathematically. That it's just like the citations you were talking about earlier. I loved when, I started seeing the popular models use that, and then it would show you, hey, here's where we got that link. It used to
mm,
be last year, back in I think September, around that time, the GPT plugins would let you use different browsing, plugins that were basically other companies with an API. And they would do all that sorting for you, and they would scrape the web for you, and they would search those sites and then deliver it back into an AI, chewable form, and it could, properly deal with it. And they would, provide citations. I know I used to use Wolfram Mathematics plugin, and I would use Scholar AI. It was incredible. I think they had like over 20 million peer-reviewed papers. And so I did quite a bit of research there and used a few plugins simultaneously to do that. But now that's been absorbed as a feature. Oh, okay. All right. Now citations and everything we just talked about is an internal feature of OpenAI's ChatGPT-4 and its platform. So I watched a lot of companies just kind of fall to the wayside when that happens. One of the ones that I used for a while went away quickly. Lessons learned. You don't want to, center your services and products around someone else's feature, because if that changes, everything you've got is gone. So it's scary. But anyway, yeah. So there's a lot to consider with, how we verify and how we validate this information along the way. I know among my cohorts and our meetings, we've had plenty of discussions about how to quantify this. Explainable AI should be a huge buzzword in regular life where people are asking that question. It's like, well, can you explain it? Can you verify that? I mean, it's like taking someone's word for it, like a stranger, and these things are meant to sound convincing, in terms of an LLM model. Okay. I remember when Bard, it was sometime in December, and Google made an announcement where they said, oh, Bard is now Gemini, and I asked Bard, I said, hey, are you the new Gemini now? And it was very confidently, yes, I am. And it went on about bragging. And then I said, all right. And then I looked online and I was like, that's not right. And so I asked it again. I said, well, hey, it says here you're not actually Gemini. It says, oh, I'm sorry, I was mistaken. Well, great, because you're an awesome salesman. And I for a split second, it was very convincing. But in the matter of something like, creative art and you're writing, this is fine. This is a liberal thing. Okay. It's a creative beast. But in the world of accuracy and precision, it can't do math. Okay. You'd have a better time in some cases just using word numbers like FOR, UR plus, THREE, 4 + 3. We did, and just to, credence to your claims here and mine as well. I ran some labs where we were showing off a concierge bot that I built on OpenAI. It was my GPT. And we took, I went to example.net and I got this fake company roster. It had the names of the employees, where they worked and their emails, what they did. Okay. And that was an ordered list. It's just a spreadsheet. And I fed that into its knowledge base, and it makes its own vector database. It vectorizes that in the backgrounds, at least back then it did. And you could ask it questions directly related to the document. I had it set up to not use the internet, not use code interpreter, and not, it's very, very much in the rails. Okay. And it would tell you how many employees worked there. And then you could ask it again and say, are you sure? And it would say, oh, I'm sorry, I missed one, or I counted one twice. And you think about it. And I mean, and that's one weakness that's going to go away soon enough, I'm quite sure, at the rapid pace things have been moving. But you never know when an exception like that can occur. At what point do you sleep good at night? Well, I think the point that people would have to have that ability would be when they own their own internal large language model for, their company or themselves. I know we've talked at length about this at the QAAR.ai. What's going on at QAAR right now with a sovereign OS and AI built into it, which is really incredible and exciting to be a part of. But we need something, that we have control of. And so if you take an open model with open weights, okay, that you can verify, you can validate where that came from, that you keep it protected and you keep it, let's say, on an intranet, and it's not exposed, and only people who could really exploit knowing those weights would have to be on the inside of the company, and let's say you're just using it to access company documents, and you can get consistent results out of something. Well, if you use the OpenAI's API and you call it a particular model, you can count on that model to work. But there's other things they do where they've A/B tested people. They've A/B tested the users, where if you're on their site and you're not using the API, all of a sudden you're getting inconsistent results. I was doing a research project for weeks, and all of a sudden it was answering different and acting different. And you notice, you pick up on it. It's just like a person. It's like, are you okay? You know? And ChatGPT is like, no, I'm not. I'm different now. But you get this inconsistency, and you're, even if you're not counting on it to do something for your company, but you're doing research or you're writing. Okay. And you're like, okay, I know I'm going to get this much work done today. I've got 2 hours. So I can sit down and hammer this out and do this research and have it pull things together for me. And then I can make human decisions, you know, and intelligent, thoughtful moves based on that. And then it doesn't work. It used to be hitting the limit was my problem. It's like, hey, you've got to back off for an hour. You've hit your limit, buddy. But then after that, eventually I was noticing the A/B testing. So a lot of people try things out there, though. It's a wonderful way to proof of concept. Prove an idea to someone, and maybe a manager or something, to say, "Hey, we could really use this." I listen to a lot of podcasts out there where you're hearing reports of people not telling their bosses, and everybody's has it as a secret tool, as a Swiss Army knife to help them with their job, and they're using it to keep an edge for themselves. And I think everybody should have that edge until things evolve, and then we have a new edge, and it not necessarily, like we said, replace people. I think that's a bad way of thinking. That's a bad way of going down the road. But there are certain things out there that are dangerous, and AI makes the most sense. And I'll turn it around and go to the physical world for a minute. But have you seen these? They're not really drones, but they're robots that go up and down large towers to clean them, like industrial type stuff. Different facilities, and it's being used in, and albeit that's very simple. It's still way better than someone risking their life, or just a lot of what's implemented in, let's say, drone technology for auto flight path management. A lot of things where someone could get hurt working on towers in the snow. All of a sudden, the drone can do it, and it has enough, intelligence to actually maneuver and do things. But it's not so simple with humans and human work. That's more intellectual, or more just brain work, and then keyboard work. That's where things can get dangerous as well. So have you had any recent software experiences yourself that you're profoundly attached to with AI, or something that's helping you in different lines of work? What are you using right now, you think, that
Yeah,
helps?
so I think the use of co-pilots, although, and one of the things is we really must acknowledge that there are limitations. As we start looking into it, there are limitations. If you come into the field with no prior background and you are expecting that okay, let's maybe make it a bit more specific. Coding, for example. If you try to pick up a VS Code and say, I'm not a programmer, but now there's quite a lot of, you have your GitHub Copilots, you have I'm actually using Sorcery right now quite a lot. So if you come into it thinking that I'm not a programmer, but now because of all this, I can start to do programs,
Mhm.
then I think that's not the best place and the right place to start. Because for simpler instructions, you may be able to get it working, but you will never be able to piece things together like a seasoned programmer is able to
That's
do.
right. Hmm.
But then if you are already having some programming background and co-pilots come in as an augmentation tool, then I think you can do your things a lot faster. And in the process of it, you may learn quite a few new techniques that you might not have come across until you start, Googling and end up at Stack Overflow with, oh, I didn't know it could be done this way. So
Yeah.
I've a lot of interesting ways. Oh, I didn't know I could simplify it this
Right.
way to
Right.
optimize it.
Uh-huh.
But it's because you knew how to interpret what has come back, it became an augmented tool for myself. So
Yeah.
that's one area that I've been using quite a lot.
Mhm.
The other, which I think a lot of enterprises will find it useful, as long as we know what the limitations are, is really back to that point of RAG. A lot of solutions now have RAG embedded into it as well. So I use this solution called Liner as well. They didn't start off as an AI company. They were very much a web annotation company a few years ago when I was using them. But when GPTs came out, they repivoted and they are now, so they were more in the space of like Raindrop, Pocket, etc. in the years before. They took all those features out. They are now, really about helping you understand documents that you have put in there.
Mhm.
So those are things that are really very helpful because in the line of work that a lot of us do, we are just swarmed with a lot of information. Having augmented tools, of course, we're not talking about the sensitive information going out. For those enterprise use cases, you will need to have your own contained environment to get that to work securely. Assuming those can be done. Those are very useful tools to really help you digest a lot of the information from there. Understanding the limitations then become very important. I frankly don't know, picking on the point that you're mentioning about, 3+4. I was recently reading a book about generative AI using LangChain as well. One of the recommendations in there was really about, those tools are great at doing summarizations and creative works. Simple things like what is 3+4. If you were to ask a language model to solve that, that's not what it's built for.
No, no.
So the recommendations in the way that this can be architected is using a language model through the a chain of reasoning to know that I have to do something that needs calculations. I can call a program that does a calculation, and that becomes deterministic.
Mhm.
So there are some things where, within the bigger part of your solution, if there are some parts of it which is deterministic, the language model through reasoning will be able to know, you can build it in that way that they will be able to know that I need to do some computations here. These are the parameters, and this is a function that I can use. And you rely on a deterministic part of your solution to do some portions of it. Why I hesitate on this point is this is where we are with technology. Frankly, with GPT-5, 6 coming up, I have no idea whether, they are going to take multimodality in a very different way, that they are even able to solve this in a much better way. No
Right.
one's, right? If we look at Sora today versus 1 year ago, there's all these memes about Will Smith and spaghetti. You
Yeah,
just
the
compare it was 1 year ago and what it is now. That's how quickly the advancement of these technologies that's out there is shortening. So no one's to know. Who knows? Maybe in another 6 months or so, they will have some ways of solving even the deterministic problems in a very sure way. So,
right.
but that's at
Uh-huh.
least current technology. What I've come across is that people are looking at it from that angle. When you build that whole solution, maybe you can try thinking about breaking things up where there are some parts which are deterministic, using reasoning to get the model to then say this is what I have to use to solve that problem, that part of the problem.
Right, right. Yeah, there's so and we have a question for the audience. I want to go ahead and I want to say that we should mention QStar. Sam Altman refuses to talk about QStar. He was on Lex Friedman
Yeah.
podcast the other day, but I've known about what it does, and a lot of us have kind of known what it does, but where they're at with it and what they're doing is the mystery. But you have three models that are self-regulating. One of them is really good at doing one thing. One of them is the large language model that's the most creative in interfacing with the user. And then there's another one checking everything else out in the interim. Really, you're going to like right now they have what's called code interpreter on, your OpenAI GPT-4. It's just there. And it has the ability to solve math problems properly, but it doesn't do that in the natural language. It does that by passing data that it's derived sentiment analysis. So they said 8, they actually mean the digit 8, and it'll send that data as probably JSON interchange, structured interchange to be processed in a Python environment, and then it returns that result. And that's how it's able to do certain things on the screen that aren't necessarily Dolly generated. Okay, so we're talking about Matplotlib, other libraries that are a part of Python that can be used in Python to plot graphs and other visuals. So there is that. We have a question from our one of our attendees. Han here says, how do we enforce sufficient assurance from cybersecurity aspects for the use of AI? And I'm going to go ahead and that's for you, Gerry.
Yep. So this is an area which is currently still developing. If we look at some of the discourse around some of the regulations that's coming up, one of the arguments really is that while terms such as risk assessment, security assessments have been done, have been put in there, there's no structured approach to deal with it from an auditor's perspective yet. So I come from a kind of cybersecurity audit background as well, right? In order to do the work that we do, there must be some established frameworks or standards for you to be able to do it consistently across different providers. We are not there yet, but this is an active space that a lot of people are looking at. I'm also a co-chair of the Singapore's AI Technical Committee. So we interface with the ISO JTC1 Standards Committee on Artificial Intelligence standards. So some of the things that we are really looking into are exactly things like this. How do you start looking into the security and privacy aspects around AI in general, and as well as looking into generative AI, as well as addressing the gaps in the existing standards where it is high level. It doesn't cover quite a few things around methods of evaluation. What are the metrics that needs to come out of these evaluations? In cybersecurity, for example, we know that very well. So that's an area, if we're looking at it from an AI perspective, there is still a lot of work that is being done around the world to develop that. When we look at cybersecurity of AI systems, the other angle to think about it is it's not just the model, but the very architecture that you put this whole thing on. Because once you start looking into the models don't exist by themselves. They have to be part of a bigger ecosystem. This ecosystem, some of them could be your fundamental tech stacks that you have, whether you have your own GPU farms, you use your cloud services, there is a tech stack. Cybersecurity around those tech stacks is established, is something that we know how to do, and we are able to do that. There are also things like interfacing into your data stores as well. So whether it's about data coming in for the training and subsequently, if we are looking at maybe say RAG implementations, you need to interface that into the documents that you have within the organizations as well. So this interface between where you host the model, the API calls that you probably will then be using either as part of your training pipeline or as part of your inference, that part needs to be addressed as well. And that is also something that has been established. It's been around for quite a while. And that's one angle of looking into it as well.
Yeah.
Two recent things that I've come across. One is recently, I think the Treasury Department in the US released a paper around cybersecurity of AI systems for financial sectors. One of the large thing that they were talking about is precisely that whole architecture that you have. It's where the models sit on. It relies on a lot of interfacing into it, and that's where a lot of the work needs to look into that portions as well. So that's one large area of that. There are developing research around breaking into AI systems, and red teaming of LLM models is something that has been going on for months. Recently, there was this research paper that came up about the exact title I couldn't remember, but it's within it, it has the phrases coercing LLM to do anything. So it's essentially trying to coerce a LLM to do something beyond the guardrails that you may have put in place.
Right.
Interestingly, for a very long time, I have been always thinking about the so what, because what's the impact of this? And I think what that research really shed some light on is where it is now, some of the things that we're worried about are around things like, information going back to the users may be wrong. You tell me things that you are not supposed to have told me.
Oh yeah.
And possibly, in terms of misinformation, disinformation. But one interesting point that was brought up in a podcast where the researchers were talking about it as well, is that the bigger impact is not today. The bigger impact is when we start interfacing these LLM models, not in a chat manner, but you are using the models to then have interaction capabilities with other downstream processes, be it in digital form or mechanical form through robotics, interfacing, etc. If you are then able to get the models to go outside of its guardrails when there are those integrations in the future, that's where the worry comes in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So that really kind of answered that question in my mind. I've been thinking about it for quite a few months, right? What's the impact? Yeah, you tell me something which is not right. I jailbreak the thing and you tell me things that you are not supposed to tell me, so what? But
Right.
I think after having read that, it really, a light bulb went up that yes, the impact may not be today, but I think why we need to secure it is when these models in the future start interfacing with the physical world, then I
Right.
think that's where the dangers
Yeah.
begin.
It can be as bad as any bad actor. Okay. And so if you were just slightly fudge the reality of the results, nothing substantial, but just enough to make it inaccurate, that can be enough sabotage to ruin things and flip a bit one way or another, and cause something to not round up or what have you. There's so many ways something like that can go wrong, and it's garbage in, garbage out. And it's like the data pipeline after AI, and what, like you said, everything beyond that system, and after it, and how that gets handled. It goes back to any argument where well, so what, you've got a human in the loop looking at all this mess, and they're at the end of that loop. And so at the beginning of the loop, you have, no matter how many skillful people you have on a problem like this, or on this puzzle, there's just so much to explain, to verify, in order to do this, in order to quantify and measure it properly. Even if, like I said, you have a set, like, it's a new world. Programmers are getting different results out of these LLMs. It's the first time that it's not consistent, which normally in a procedural, environment of a programming language, you're going to have, cause and effect be pretty obvious, or at least, attainably understandable. And in this case, we're dealing with a new wave of mystery. And it's just, I feel like it really comes down to critical decision making, where, do we absolutely need it here? No, then let's let this evolve before we approach it. But could we really use this here? Would it really move the needle for us and make an impact that's positive? Okay. Yes. All right. Is it allowing us to do something we couldn't do before? No, it's just letting us do it faster. Oh, okay. All right. And so you've got to really find a metric that matters in a lot of this, because it could save money, but the potential, yeah, so it could save money. I could win the lottery tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, it could do a lot of things, but what is it going to consistently do? Okay. And when it does deliver, even if it sounds right, are we going to, how are we going to make sure that's right? I feel like it's going to cost more to implement certain things along the way. If people really want it, it's going to take a lot more human power to hand verify these things, until we find good automated processes, until we get the black box aspects out of the way, until we can further understand and alleviate some of these mysteries. We're going to be left with a very cautious approach. It's going to take more employees if you think about it. And developers can do a lot, programmers can do a lot to automate a lot of the testing and a lot of processes, and that's what it's going to come down to. But ultimately, it's going to take everybody verifying their parts of it. Let's say you're contributing to the corpus of data and you're in a research team, and all of a sudden, you're being misrepresented because the algorithm that's chunking the data, which to everybody out there, you have a context window, or you have this limited size of a document that the LLM can ingest at one point, right? And you'll say, oh, okay, maybe 1,000 tokens for this one, right? It's more than that for a lot out there, but 1,000 tokens. That's actually what Pi.ai uses. I love that one. That you should give that one a try if you haven't used it some, but it's very handy. And they don't have hallucination problems, mind you, but they have this window. And let's say that you have a document file, and let's say it's 2 pages long. Well, that's digestible, but perhaps 3 pages isn't. Okay. And then so you've got to figure out where to divide that document or chunk it in order to keep, vectorizing its contents and forming an index of the sentiment that's within that document to say, hey, they're asking these questions about this book. And it's like if you wrote a book and you had 5 lessons that you taught within that book and they're scattered throughout, what if it missed one? It didn't understand how to get that, or for some reason something's missed along the way. Or in any data, you have something that's very okay. We gave it chunks that made sense, and we think that's just going to work, and then it still doesn't work. And why is that? So again, it's a growing art form, and it is a science, but it's a growing science. And so even with the best minds and the best ethics and the best compute in place, you still have this work to do that's going to take people, humans in the loop, essentially, at every step of the way to make sure this is right. Um, and it's a good investment. This is going forward. This is building a new foundation for many companies and making things possible for small and mid-sized businesses. This is making things possible for individuals. Okay. And it's amazing. It's exciting. And yeah, it's scary what can happen. And like any powerful tool, it's the potential is, if it's a good tool, it has a lot of applications, So and that's the versatility we're seeing today. And it's more than a power grab. It's a rush for opportunity, for a lot of people out there. So
Yeah.
I
But
have
but
to be.
one of the
Uh-huh.
yeah, sorry. Well, one of the challenges in this really is that the tool, well, a tool is a tool,
Mhm.
and it is in the hands of humans, and there will be one side of it which is really looking at the opportunities from a very pure perspective. But yet, on the other hand, when there are opportunities to do something, whether we are talking about, scammers, we are talking about people who deliberately want to create misinformation or disinformation campaigns, uh, the same tool is in the hands of, individuals. And where business opportunities arise as well, that's where I think some of the regulations, I think, is going to probably take a spectrum where we are not trying to probably over, this is my observations. I'm not a policymaker, so I shouldn't say we. So my observations is that I don't think that there will be largely over regulations across the whole spectrum, but for some identified cases where there is harm that can be caused, that's where I think some of the regulations will step in. While for the larger portions of it, it will be very much a soft law approach into it. So some of those where I think hard regulations around the world have been springing up, it's really around the deepfakes, misinformation
Yeah.
campaigns,
Mhm.
recommender systems that's coming in that essentially has the potential to change behaviors depending on who's in control of the algorithm. So I think those are important things to really put some of the guardrails behind what is acceptable and what is not. If we look at the EU AI Act as one example, a clear prohibited case that came up was really about the mass scraping of images from the internet to build a database, and that's Clearview, right? We saw that a few years ago. Um, yeah, so there are, the technology is there. I think it's quite hard right now to say, let's put a stop to some of the development in certain areas because there's no going back. I
No, there's
think
not.
once this technology has been out, it's in the hands of both the good and the bad. We have to live with the fact that it is out there. And from a regulation standpoint, I think it's really approaching it from a sensible approach of where are the harms to society that we need to be worried about. Let's put some of the guardrails around that while still allowing the broader innovations to happen. So I think that's generally kind of the directions I've been seeing in some of those where they have taken a more hard stance towards regulations.
Right, right. Yeah, that and it's just again, it's education across the board for everybody here. It's just a new skill. It's like the internet all over again. Oh, email, oh, security, oh, don't, share your password or don't give out your address or, and then we've seen the progression of all of this and then, and we've all had scripts and things along the way out there on the internet before AI was prominent, where people could hack people, or even back in the late 90s, early 2000s, people would get a hold of scripts to kick people off of MSN or AOL, chats and things like that. But the real hackers out there, the real engineers and people who are able to exploit systems and the ones who are able to protect it, they're the ones that can really do the damage. But there's so much more low-hanging fruit these days because these tools are now more readily available. You could say, oh, I would love to, someone wants to scam somebody, but they're not bright enough or, and educated enough to actually have access to those tools or know how to use them and then be bad, and use it that way. Um, but now here we've got the ability for people to make deep fakes pretty quickly in a few minutes, in fact, if you're skilled enough, and for people who might be, hard of hearing or it's over a phone. I know one of the popular exploits is, Mom, I need money, and it sounds like their kid, and and they're in trouble and all this. And there's so many exploits. I mean, what gives us perception gives us the same delusion where all of a sudden we think we see something or hear something a certain way. And yeah, that's got to be them. They said a few key things about some things, but those key things were online publicly, and it was easy to find out information on somebody and just, build a persona out of that. So I've had to help protect a lot of systems, and I've worked with digital forensics for many years, and I've helped catch criminals, in fact, with a variety of homebrew ideas and solutions that turned out to work. They were all open source, and that's something else we're going to cover today as well, is the power of communities, the open source community coming into play to look at this, and everybody taking a part in, let's participating in the overall safety and security of this new technology as it is deployed everywhere. Maybe this would be a good time to bring up the AI Verify Foundation and how they are making that possible. Or would you like to? Let's talk about what they do, and I'll let you lead this one here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I get into it, I wanted to maybe add on to that comment on scams and disinformation, etc. So in one of the recent training I was doing as well, we covered some of these examples, and indeed there have been quite a few. We would have seen that in the news, right? There'll be things like what you have mentioned, scammers calling, parents, and essentially sounding like the children. So that's one of the things that has happened, and it was reported in CNBC, I believe. There were also things around video calls. So to your point about how easy it is for deep fakes, there were video calls that were made, and essentially tricking the person to transfer some money to help out the friend. And interestingly, there was this book by Nina Schwick. I believe it's called Disinformation or something like that. She made an interesting observation that humans, when we are previously, the scammers or phishing emails, right? When things are textual, we have we have a way to be more disconnected from what the scammers are trying to do, and we have a bit of time to really think about, is this real? But she made an observation that once it starts crossing into audio and video, we have this natural tendency to just believe what we hear, what we see.
We just
And we
take
just,
naturally
it
start
really
taking.
opens up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are naturally trusting when we hear something that sounds like what we believe it is, and as well as seeing it. So it is definitely going to be opening up opportunities for scammers. There are a lot of news coverage that 2024 is going to be the year where we start seeing AI technology potentially having an impact on elections around the world as well through disinformation campaigns, and we have seen it in the past few months already, with the few elections that's been happening. So yeah, so I think on that point, it's really something where earlier I talked about AI literacy across the board. Why I think some of the regulations call for that. I believe the in the US, the AI Bills of Rights did call out something about literacy across the general population as well. I think that's
Mhm.
where that's probably important.
That it is, yeah, definitely. And I mean, there was a study done not long ago where they said that ChatGPT 4 had a 20% success rate in talking people down from extremist theories. And so people who were following pretty far-fetched ideas out there, who really were taking the word of others, and mostly people they didn't actually know, and going along on the bandwagon for it. And then ChatGPT was able to help them do their own research to a degree that they were unfollowing whoever it was that was spreading this disinformation, or whatever it was. Okay. And it's important to question things out there. It's important to be nice, not call people names, and let people explore, but the moment that people get together on a bandwagon and start nearly demanding you join them, and that there's a problem. And you could have something totally good and wonderful, and the way you do it is still the wrong approach. You're not going to force
Yeah.
people into that. So it's just as much the double-edged sword, like we're talking about. AI can be just as much a possible cure for certain ailments that come from the AI, misuse of AI itself, or just not even misuse, but just the way things are. This is the Wild West right now for all of this. This is way accessible. Everybody has this. I have what, 4 apps on my phone that have a variety of different ones that I use for different things. I have some I use for this, some I use for knowledge bases. I have my reasons for having them. I sit back and go, wow, all these years I've been using computers, I've had different apps for different things. There's really no difference, except for I'm chatting on the command line again. It's like we all got tricked into using the console and just having a text adventure with our robots. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to actual software tools to help us verify what's really going on. I know that I've been a very busy person. I know you are too. We're both involved in different associations and foundations, and related to all of this, and helping people come together, have the tools to actually do something moving forward, actually help enable those who are technical, say, hey, I found a tool that you should be, check out, or people who aren't technical to be helped by people who are, to say, hey, I know a way to protect you. And it takes a village. And the beauty of an open source approach here is that this is the democratization of our own security. And that is so important, because you cannot rely on the powers that be are limited, even in a perfect world, whatever that is. There's logistics are a thing. There's so many, time is a thing. This is a factor. And you can't always wait on someone else to come to your rescue. And you need to take that into your own hands and be empowered, and to be also educated in this, to be properly onboarded into using these technologies. It's like shop class. Hey, we have a bunch of safety rules here, and you got to get to know them. And you see people doing stuff without goggles, right? And that's what you see when companies prematurely deploy a system and AI and let it go and do its thing. Like, yeah, we're going to save money, $1 million in the hole later. you haven't done anything but hurt yourself. And so you have to have these guardrails in place, and not just within the AI, but within every step down the line. What's checking it, what's verifying it, the people involved. This new, this new type of understanding across the board. It's just like I said with the internet. Oh, don't share your passwords. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't give out your name, your location. I mean, it's a new set of rules. It's a new set of things to get used to, but everybody's so used to using it. I don't see, a problem with further education here. Uh, so AI Verify Foundation really caught my attention, and you showed me this in one of your posts actually. And
Mm.
ever since then, I've been friends with Harris. I don't know if he's with us right now or not. I'm going to check the participants here.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you. Mm.
Not yet. That's okay.
Mm.
So how did you find out about them, and what's your involvement right now?
Yeah, I can share a bit about AI Verify. But a caveat first, I'm not representing AI
I
Verify. I'm not part of the foundation itself. So AI Verified has a bit of history. If we look back several years ago, Singapore actually created the model AI governance framework, along with it some checklist on how businesses can use the frameworks as well as the guidance in the checklist to look at the processes, look at the AI that they are developing within the organizations, to look at things around governance structures, your human centricity, human in the loop, looking at transparency angles, etc. One of the one of the challenges that was then recognized in looking at that was, how do you actually check for the things that need to be done, whether it's at the process level, whether it's at the technology, in terms of maybe I have an algorithm that does things like facial recognition, for example, right? And I'm using it in as part of a security for getting into the organization. Maybe that's the use case.
Right.
How do I
Mm,
actually test for such systems? That was the gap that was identified. The market had solutions, and these solutions live on two broad spectrums of it. On the one hand, you have open source libraries that are available.
mhm.
You have things like ART, the Adversarial Robustness Toolkit. It's on GitHub. You can download that. If you know how to program, you can write your own testing routines that essentially uses a library. IBM AIF 360 has libraries as well. Fallon from Microsoft. So there are libraries made available, but you have to build your own tools to
Yeah.
essentially make use of the libraries.
Mhm.
The other end of the spectrum, you have startups, you have data platform companies coming to organizations to say, you are already using my platform, add on this module, increase these license fees, you can get, some of the methods to do it. So those are two broad spectrums where one hand you have to do quite heavy investments into technology, which is still very nascent.
Mhm.
You're not sure whether you want to sink in investments into locking in over a 3 year or however long
Oh
that
yeah.
may be, or
Mhm.
of licenses, when you know that it's an area which is developing, a better tool may come along in just 6 months' time. So
That's right.
companies are unsure, should I invest in that? Companies also do not want to build their own solutions from scratch. So where
Mm,
AI Verify comes in is to essentially address that kind of sweet spot in the middle, where it is an open source and it's under Apache 2 license. And that's one of the more permissive licenses. It's a bit akin to MIT. It is just that with Apache, if you make major changes, you have to disclose what the changes were. But largely, it is a very permissive license in there. It
mhm.
means that you can use it, change it if you want to for your own internal use.
That's
You
right.
can view it as a base. You can change it to fit whatever
Mhm.
you want. Whether you contribute back or not, that's completely
Right.
a different matter. If you want to fork a completely different product and your your GitHub then has more traction than the original, so be it. I think that's
That's
the
right.
thinking behind AI Verify when they first created something, put it out on open source with the idea that it is then visible for everybody to view. You are trust element comes in. It's open for people to contribute to the bigger the project itself. Or if you choose to embed it within your own solution, or you believe you have a better idea that you want to fork that GitHub and then just create something, so be
Yes.
it. So that was the thinking behind it, where there's a spectrum, a need was identified, and then they created it.
Right.
Where it is now, it is still at an early stage. It's available on the internet. You search for it under AI Verify. It's on GitHub. It runs through a Docker environment as well. And the reason for that design choice was also acknowledging the fact that you will not want to send your model and data to somebody else. You will want to be able to run it internally.
That's
So the
right.
way that you set it up as well is, you just clone everything internal. It runs within your own environment in there. And there are 11 principles that they cover in there. So things around explainability, transparency, quite a few of them are process level checks. There are some things where they do technical checks. So those things around fairness, things around explainability and robustness, those are the ones that the metrics and measurements have been quite well established in. So when we talked about the open source libraries that you can build your own programs, a lot of all those, whether it's ART, your IBM AIF 360, etc., they address things around the fairness, robustness, as well as explainability of some of the ML models. Currently, AI Verify is very much on traditional AI. It doesn't cover the generative AI yet, although under the Singapore, as part of the AI, I may be wrong. I'm not sure whether it's under the AI Verify or it's part of the IMDA, which is the Infocom Media Development Authority. I may have gotten that fact wrong. They have also created guidelines around LLM evaluation and creating of sandboxes for developers to essentially bring their LLMs into the sandbox to do the red teamings, the testings, the evaluations for suitability as well. So that's where AI Verify then comes into it. Technical checks in a few different areas. It makes it easy for organizations to, once you spin it up, web interface is there, you put up your models or your data files, or you can even have APIs to interface into your pipeline. So if you do not want to put the models and the data there, give it the API to your inference engine, it can do its checks from there.
Right.
And subsequently, reports come out that can be used. Where can contributions come in? Contributions generally can come in at a few levels. One is maybe at the verticals. When we say vertical, it could mean that you may be in the financial services space where there are some specific guidance around what you need to test your models for. So one of the things is then you can develop the plugins. All the tests are done via a plugin mechanism. So as a contributor, so that's a second level of contribution. I can contribute more tests that goes into the framework. And within the framework, that's where you can select what plugins to run. So that's the architecture behind it. Or you can contribute at the level of creating reports that make it more meaningful for your organization.
I see.
So out of the box, it comes with some templates, drag drop widgets. You can get it done fairly quickly. But you may then say that, hey, I actually need the reporting to be done in a slightly different way, different information that I want to put into the report. Contributors can then either you do it internally or to the project itself to contribute some of the new widgets on contents, on the layouts, etc. So the idea then is that, the foundation has taken the first steps in creating that base capabilities that's there. putting it out into open source really is to then encourage the adoption as well as to encourage the contributions back into it. So that's kind of broadly the motivations behind AI Verify from my understanding. I've been interacting with them more in my capacity from the Singapore Computer Society, where essentially we are trying to work together with them to bring the adoption and contribution levels to a higher level. So while I'm not representing AI Verify, so there may be some facts in there that I may not have said because I was not aware of it. But from the interactions, what my understanding were, those were the things that I've highlighted.
Excellent. Yeah. And it's good to know that organizations like this are popping up and with a real intent to help and with the know-how to do so. And their members, their premium members are people like Google, IBM, Salesforce, Red Hat, Microsoft, Infocom Media Development Authority, and Acadium. So, I mean, it's really good to know that that work's being done, and this will spill over into many other communities and start affecting everybody in a good way, hopefully sooner than later. And this is my intent, is just to stay current with what they're doing and being a part of it and helping get those toolkits out to people. And not everything is red teaming and blue teaming. You have this thing in the middle, this very gray area of testing, and it is rigorous, and all of it's rigorous when you get down to it. But at this point, we need this type of leadership. We need these organizations doing something, and the open source is definitely the key factor here, and it has brought us so many wonderful things. And I know I have been an open source benefactor, someone who has definitely benefited from the open source since 2000, when I got into Linux, when I got into programming Perl, and using that in conjunction, and using it for digital forensics and all sorts of things that opened up to me and got me where you see today. And it's created I've been able to do so many things because of this. And I'm here because of the open source. And it's easy to just not think about something when it's like water and just, I can just turn on the water. Open source is very much around us everywhere. From the original servers that we were running the internet on, and the software, and Apache, and as things have grown, you see what we have today. Linux went corporate, and we have Red Hat, we have real security fundamentals throughout all of these organizations that have stood the test of time, and have also got us where we are today, as our systems are safe and active right now. And this is one of many tools. I'm always going to preach about the open source and its power to help create that change, and it's amazing what we can do as a community. And so, yeah, a lot of my focus and concern lately has been bridging the gaps between a lot of the international communities who are all doing a lot of the same things in an effort to make things safer, and explainable, and ultimately more effective, and more powerful in the right ways. And so I know that I've talked to you about QAAR. I had a few, let's see who's with us today here. I'll briefly speak on them for a moment, because I don't want to go down the route completely. I go to a few meetings here, and I'm helping do research. Let's see here. There we go. So essentially, it's this is an effort. So it's KWAAI.ai. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the chat for everybody here. This is great. And if you're into Linux and the open source, this is for you. And so they say the current trajectory of AI development will lead to the monopolization of wealth and power, and the theft of your personal data and skills. Kwai is countering this trend by creating free personal AI operating system we aim to empower users to retain and own their personal data and knowledge model, enhancing their digital abilities and competitiveness in the modern economy. QAAR focuses on developing tools akin to a Linux for a personal AI, researching fundamentals, focusing on model accuracy and efficiency, and advocating for policy changes that support personal data and AI ownership. And so, and they are a registered nonprofit corporation. They're volunteer based. Their open source AI research and development lab is focused on democratizing artificial intelligence by building a personal AI. Okay. So this is a great team of people. I am so excited to be a part of this, just to help spread the word and get the information in there. But as this grows and all of these associations and foundations grow and gain traction, it's gonna come time to really share that with the rest of the world and bring that down to earth into a practical way. And I'm really excited for education and safe deployment of AI, implementing that in ways that make sense. A lot of case studies that I'm finding right now are compelling, and a lot of things that we're seeing in the world are just as compelling to hold back a little bit and make sure we don't go down a road too quickly that's going to cause damage, because you know there's a lot, even if you have the best of intent, that there's no guarantees here. You'd have great kids, great curriculum, great intent, and then all of a sudden the system's giving wrong answers, and it could be subtle, but and everyone's mileage is going to vary. There's a lot of studies out there. There's some really aggressive testing going on right now, where a whole class is being taught. I think they're third or fourth graders, and they're all being taught with AI as their teacher, and the students have wonderful things to say about it. We know exactly why this, that, and the other. And I thought to myself, well, good teachers tell you that, but they don't have all the time. And I know that when I was growing up, I know when I was 6 years old, I got a Tandy TRS-80 color computer from Radio Shack. My grandparents bought it for me, thinking it would be a good idea because computers were happening. Okay. And obviously, and so I got into that. And after a few years, I came across this, and you could hook a cassette tape player up to the computer, and that's how you would record your software. You could use a floppy drive, or you could use a cassette drive, tape. But there were programs that were hybrid, where you would put the tape in and you would hit the play button, and it would load the program, and then it would leave it in the play mode but paused digitally, and it would teach you math, and it would put the formulas on the screen and let you try to work that out, and then it would automatically play the tape and start talking to you again. And I thought that was so helpful. And this is back in the 80s. There's no AI here. Okay, this is procedural, if then that, or logic. And but what I experienced is the same thing that others are experiencing in this level, is infinite patience. And sure, I had to hit the rewind button, or sure, I had to start something over, but there was never anyone's impatience getting in the way of me learning why and how something was a certain way. And that's one of the beautiful things about taking the time with your, say in Chat GPT, or you're on Gemini, or wherever you're at, Claude, whatever you use, and you're talking to it, you gain that ability to learn at your own pace, and it's very helpful. And if I asked friends of mine who are very technical, and we're all very technical for years, have known each other, and then all of a sudden I don't understand something, it can get annoying. Okay. And then you sit there, or someone doesn't get it, and you're like, come on, you're so smart, you get all this, why don't you get this? And it's like, just having a moment. But honestly, just having the ability to have that infinite patience, and keep in mind, it's not infinite wisdom, and it's not infinite accuracy. Okay. And that's one of the things that we talk about in safety, is and explainability is, hey, let's verify these answers. Let's make sure that it's coming up right. It's as simple as one number being off on a math question. Like, why did I fail this? I used the tools that the school gave me. Well, guess what? The school gave you tools that were a little premature to market, or a little, needed further testing, or needed this, that, and the other. And it has to be tested all the way to the nth degree, via automation and a combination of, human guidance, of course, as much as possible, really, so we get things in place. It's going to take a constant state of evolving the testing and the protocols, and in that bringing the curriculum closer to its accuracy. I had an idea many weeks ago, which was, if you're deploying an AI solution, let's say you've got a chat bot out there working for your company and it's giving solutions, and all of a sudden it escalates you. And we've seen this before on some websites. It's, would you like to speak to someone on the phone? And the bot escalates you to that. But instead of asking a question to a student, it might just need to go, this answer is, if there's any question about it, the AI should say, we need a human in the loop, and it called the teacher over to say, hey, work on this, show the student, and escalate that and show the student that it doesn't know. Hey, I'm not sure. I mean, any good teacher is going to tell you in a class, okay, that's beyond the scope of this class. The question you just asked is beyond the scope of my knowledge, or I don't know that, or I'm learning that right now. I couldn't tell you, but that's enough to rectify the situation. Oh, they don't know. Okay, I'll just wait and I'll figure this out later. But if you're given the wrong answer, guess what? You're going to go down the road with that answer. And it's just like you said, Gerry, just like in an office environment, just like in corporate systems, where all of a sudden what's downstream on that pipeline of data going to the next step and the next step, and where is this getting pushed through, and is that garbage, is that real, is this good data, is this the correct answer, is this an explainable path, can we cite that path that it took, do we have a receipt for that answer, how can we verify that, what's the checksum? These are the questions I think about every day, and I have to because I'm building things myself, and it's a fun time to be doing this, and it's a very exciting thing to involve yourself with, but it's very tricky, even at the smallest degree. And you think, oh, I've built something small and containable, and this is working a certain way, and what just happened? And you never know sometimes until weeks later, a month later, or something. And it takes money to test this. The compute that it takes to do something on OpenAI it may not be much for ChatGPT 3.5, but they charge more per token, in all the, what is it, 150 tokens of interchange in ChatGPT 4. And the same is true for all the other models out there in the world, and how that's being done. If you have your own infrastructure, and even right now on a laptop, you can get certain applications that will let you, albeit slowly, run an LLM. Okay, you've got your own, let's say, Gemma on your computer. That's Gemini. That's Google's small language model. Okay, or any of the other ones out there. Maybe like a Mixtral, or maybe you're running just a homebrew one. There's so many models out there to choose from, but whatever it is, if you run it on your own hardware, then you're not being charged for those computes. But you do have to wait all that time, because you do not, I mean, it takes so much money. And right now, I think that for, less than 10 grand, you can buy and build a computer system that has 48 gigabytes of RAM on it. And that's what it takes to run, I think, goodness, it's been too long. I can't even quote myself on this, but there is a base level of compute that's pretty nice to have. And it's, like 2 to 4 video cards, 48 gigabytes of RAM, and then 16 gigabytes of, what is it, SRAM? I forget. But or you could use that on the cloud, or let's say you're an AWS customer, or you're a Google Cloud customer, or for what it's worth, there is a lot of free compute out there, but you can only use it to a certain point, but you can try things out, which I recommend doing. HuggingFace.com, Hugging Face, you can use their pipelines and their models there and directly invoke that into your code and use their compute, not yours. So there's a lot of lovely things you can do. But if you have a serious task and a large corpus of knowledge and company data, or what have you, and whatever you're building, this new wave knowledge base of sorts, it's easy for the language model to get to and sort through, then you're going to be left with the time it takes to compute all that on limited architecture, or you're going to run that job on the cloud, or invest in more infrastructure, which I can't imagine doing right now. Who knows, in half a year, there's going to be chips out that are way more apt at handling this with algorithms embedded directly into them. I know this. There's some companies out there doing it. And NVIDIA is already looking to make bespoke chips for people. So if you develop an algorithm that works and you can transpose that to the chip level architecture, they can make it for you. And then there's your device. And we're seeing devices pop up like the Rabbit, things like that. But that doesn't use its own compute, you see. So this is where I'm at. You know, what side of the wall are you going to be on when you start testing this stuff? Are you going to be on the cloud, or are you going to be on your own infrastructure? And that's where people have to make that decision. And for the sanctity of their privacy, and or the just making it happen. Hey, I've got to use this compute out there. And I don't want to be scary about things and spooky to say, oh, your data is really at risk if you try to train something at OpenAI. Yeah, you don't want to use that through the chat, and you really can't do jobs like training jobs and fine-tuning jobs through the normal interface. But they say, and this is now at least, if you use their API and your own software, they do not use that data to train their models, that it's private, okay? But that's another company that you cannot control. At what point they decide to change that, and all of a sudden you've got to change everything you're doing. You've gone that far down the road to use them. Oh, I'll just change to another model. Well, it's not that easy. You can't just bring all that training over with you. You can understand weights, you can understand a lot of factors involved, but to just copy something over, that's not how that works, you know. Sure, you could take a knowledge base if it's portable and move it, but still you have to integrate into that. So what have you found from companies you've talked to who are looking at seriously adopting and approaching and adopting retrieval augmented generation with their data? Have you been talking to too many people about this?
Yeah, so there are two categories of clients, and I'll share also a little bit about some of the prototypes that we are building, the approach that we have taken as well. So for the clients, generally, we do see two types of them. There are some clients who have invested in GPU farms within their organizations. So for some of them, they will then download some of the models that you talked about. There's a leaderboard on Hugging Face. Depending on what their tasks are, they then look at some of the models that they can bring in-house, and they put it into their GPU farms. There, of course, there are going to be practical challenges that you need to deal with. The first is, obviously, once you have your own farm, utilization becomes your biggest problem that you got to deal with, right? Because you don't want a farm that's sitting there and not doing something. So you need to make sure you have enough workload to keep the farm busy. So there are very few organizations that are in that kind of sweet spot where they have the money to invest in it, and they also have a lot of workloads to continually put into that farm. But I've seen some clients who go down that route. The other route are those that either through their existing arrangements with AWS, Azure, where they have their own containerized environments in there. That's where then the training loads can go into it. So the premise behind that from a security standpoint is really that, because all this is anyway, take Azure as an example, all this is within your environment that you have with us. And since your emails is there, your OneDrives, everything is there, it's kind of within that same contained environment. So you view it as an extension to your enterprise tech stack, where it's essentially something that you have done the assessments around already. So that's I think the general approach that we have seen from a enterprise perspective, the way that they're doing it. Either they have their own, or they largely look at it very much from a containerized version. So they're not just using an OpenAI API the way that we may be using it. Internally, we are also prototyping because we wanted to, we have defined some risk thresholds where based on a certain few criterias, very simplified form, we don't want to overburden it. If as long as it falls with below a certain threshold, we allow some of these innovations to happen. And some of the points that you have brought up, actually, we have approached it from that angle of focus on scaffolding first.
Oh
And
yeah.
what I meant by scaffolding is that when you are first developing a prototype, there will be a lot of uncertainty. If right from the go, you start looking at things like a 300-page document, chunking it and needing to put it into a vector database, you start using, the most performant model, you are spending money unnecessarily in a very early prototyping phase. So what
Mhm.
we have done is to say, focus on the scaffolding, the logic and things needs to be there. There are some things where assumptions need to be put in place, and you can put it in place. You can later change that. One of it is, for example, your BAU use case may be the PDFs will change all the time. But if you are testing that in the initial weeks of building that prototype, you do not need to do the embedding every time you rerun a debug logic again,
Mhm.
because you can treat it like, just imagine that later I will fix this portion to allow new PDFs to come in. But let's just imagine now this is not the part of the code that I'm fixing. I will fix this with a vector database. So for simple use cases, we use FAST as well. So it's a local embedded storage. We just have it there. And when we start trying with different types of prompts to see whether the concept even works, we don't go for the highest, most performant model straight away. We use a lower model where we are able to quickly iterate through. So it's a balance between the cost and it's not too slow, where we are able to get some of the results back to see whether directionally is it going where we want it to. And when
Yeah.
we're ready to do some of a more
Mhm.
advanced testing, we can then make those changes to where the data store is, per use embedding, put in GPT-4. That's where then the cost comes in, but it's at the later part.
Right. Right.
I'm quite sure my scaffolding is actually working the way I want it to. So that's actually the approach that we had taken to kind of balance between wanting to build that scaffold, but not over investing
Yeah.
in necessary costs
Mhm.
in the early part of your development.
That's so important. You have to pivot. You have to be ready to pivot almost every week on certain things. I mean, literally, oh, we just discovered you could remove some layers of llama 70 billion and it's just as effective and accurate. There's all these developments that can drastically revolutionize the way we're even testing this stuff. And then, or you have to be careful. It could seem promising, but really have you find out later it might not be the case. Okay. Um,
Mm.
because those are
That's
early reports. They're not, I mean, it could be thorough, but it's not the rigor of all the testing. That's what rigor would, take it to the nth degree there. And I think with things related to healthcare, anything real time, fintech, your financials, um, things like this are very uh critical. And there's no room for error. Or what room there is just scary. There should be any. So yeah, but the scaffolding approach is so smart because you're really you're building a strategy. And even if hypothetically certain things work, you still have to build that structure and the what you learn in that, and it's going to guide you. It's just like my friend Patrick says, anytime you engage with a system and operate on it, it changes. What you do changes it. And so whatever plans you have don't need to be 100% accurate. They need to just be very close, because the moment you start engaging with that, it's going to change. You're going to find out new things. And so don't overinvest. Don't get ahead of yourself on that. And if it weren't for looking over and seeing all the news that people, oh, XYZ company's doing this, and oh, they're adopting this, and there's rapid adoption and growth, it just makes you go, I got to do this. And you're like, oh, I'm holding myself back. I'm waiting too long. But hey, they're the ones taking the risk and on the news. we'll find out later how that turns out, right? So there's a lot to it. I've seen people hold back too and be very careful, like IBM. Have you looked at what IBM's doing right now with their code, sort of like their Copilot, what IBM
No,
has?
not very much on
Yeah,
IBM.
they're what are they taking? Goodness, they were taking old legacy code and making it more modern. That's what they were trying to do.
Is that the Watson X?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So I
Okay.
signed up for it, but even then, you have to. There's nothing that you could try. They won't let you try anything related to that directly. They'll let you play around on the playground with a few other models, but they won't let you use that. You have to book a demo, and I suppose that's very guided, you
Mm,
know. And hey, this is a new technology. I mean, no one's going to have this right to begin with and right out of the gate. We have this expectation, and this came up this week is the note to point out about OpenAI. They're pretty overdue for releasing their new model, and they won't announce it, and Sam won't talk about it, and they're not saying this way or that way what it's going to be. But we got so used to them coming up and, oh, we've got 3.5, 4, the pre-release of what was coming with 4 turbo, and then where's 5 and what's that? And there, it's like you said also with Sora, there's so many advancements going on. It's like it's not stifling their innovation, but it sure is keeping things from going out the door right now. It's like they're waiting to release something bigger, and so it's very exciting. Um, and especially with all the change ups in the industry and people leaving different companies and going to Microsoft and elsewhere, it's astounding. Like, but it's
mm,
also but it's not a surprise. There's just so much. It's ripe with opportunity right now everywhere with this, and we want to save money and we want to do our own testing, and we can't rely on the pressure around us to rush us into this. But I like your approach. I think that's it's a thoughtful way of doing things where you get to apply testing procedures and different ideas down the line without taking the risk of you know over investing and getting ahead of yourself in any way. um,
mm.
and what do you see as what's really paying off for you right now, and what seems promising? Or is there anything in particular you could talk about with this
Mm.
system?
Some of them are related to essentially it's in the category of information processing. So the broad idea is this, right? If we look at maybe say, from a security perspective,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of information you need to consume to really know what's happening on a daily basis is quite overwhelming. So one of the prototypes that we are working on essentially does that. It does what the analyst is supposed to be doing, going out to look for certain trends in there. It does the analysis, puts it together into a more structured and actionable manner for somebody to follow up on. So that's
Okay.
one.
Mm-hmm.
The other prototype is actually more of an extension of something that I've always been wishing that I have. But I think that idea can be quite extensible. Again, it is a bit of a similar topic. I try to go to archive every day, but just under the CS category, you get like 200, 300 new papers on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to read through them to pick up the areas which I'm interested in takes
Uh-huh.
a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
So that other prototype is really about archive as an API. So it can be extended to anything with APIs. So it goes into the archive APIs on a daily basis, pull in all the abstracts based on a user keying in an area of interest. We then put a GPT layer to help refine this initial prompt. So I may say I'm interested in regulations around AI. So it goes through a first layer of GPT first to help me make that prompt better. And
Mm-hmm.
once that prompt becomes better, that becomes the context into the RAG that happens. So I pull in from the API and essentially it does in the old NLP space, we'll be looking at it as a document similarity problem. So, but now it's really with some things around LLMs where it is a little bit more performant than
Yeah.
pure document similarity, but similar concepts in there. And with this prototype, we are working out very much now the front end portion of it. So we have done all the scaffolding. We are now looking at the front end. How do you build in the transparency and the explainability aspects to make it easy for the user to know why did something come up and not another. But I think that has some potential to expand into some of the optimizations and productivity gains that we as an organization may be able to use. So those are just some ideas that we are playing around with the technology that's available.
Wonderful. I've got a question from Yimi, and Yimi's a cohort. He says, what has been your experience in implementing cybersecurity into AI solutions? And do you have experience of frameworks such as NIST, CSF, and other such OWASP that you've used in this scenario? Would you like to?
Yeah. Interesting. So far, we have not exactly done it in the NIST CSF yet, but one of the things that we have been looking at is really embedding it into part of a broader risk management process. And where I'm going with this is that if we look at any typical risk management process, whether you are following things like ISO 31000, 27005, etc., you have to go through a series of I must have a methodology of how do I do the assessments. There are registers I need to put in place. I need to describe what my risk scenarios, etc. are. Typically, we start off from, I wanted to say a blank sheet of register, but usually then it's like you have done it before, you have a template, you copy paste, and you start from there. And we're starting to see GPTs, LLMs being put into such users, right? Where I need to fill in a form based on some title. So now I've been recently playing around with capacities as well as reflector. I don't know whether you are into this graph-based note-taking applications. So
Yep.
they are
Yep.
now having these features where as long as you put in the title, you click the magic button, it
Right.
it learns, it knows how to pre-fill certain things for you. So we're taking this idea into things like creating a risk register. So imagine if you're doing a CSF, and based on a certain category, I have some controls that's loaded in there. I want to have a description on the risk scenario. Do I have to fill it in all the time myself from a blank cell? The answer is probably no. So what we're working on is based on this information that we have already. This is the risk topic or the pillar that we are looking at. These are the controls that's currently there. Give me a draft first. Give me a draft of what that is. So we are using some of this into the GRC enablement that we are working on, and it really helps to reduce the friction for somebody trying to do the risk assessments and the risk management. We have to be very careful with how the interfaces are built in, because we do not want people to say, this is final, this is what it is, because it is really meant as a draft to help you. So that's an area that we have been using. Interesting point about OWASP, and I might broaden it into the testing portions of it. Other than thinking about it from a report generation perspective, haven't really gone too much into it. If we are looking at using it to do the automation of the tests, we have not really gone there. It's probably more towards some of the areas on the reporting portions, because OWASP and similar frameworks have been around for a while. There have been a lot of established tools, whether we're talking about Qualys, Accunetics, Web Inspect. There are quite a few tools that does the web testing very well. And I don't think there's a space we want to get into to try to reinvent that. We're anyway not in the business of building products. So that's not a space that we have been spending a lot of time on, but more the downstream reporting, putting it into ideas that we can then share back with the client on what the key issues are. I think those are the areas that we have been working on.
Excellent. That's great. Yeah. I'm really impressed with the approach that you guys take over there at Deloitte. I mean, it's such a reasonable and solid step to make every bit of the way what you're doing. So that's great. And Yemi, thanks for that question, man. He and I go way back talking about the health report cards and for different vendors and ways to assess these relationships and it can be a tangle and security is just the first step every time it must be put into place and there's reasons for everything to be accurate to begin with but hey, there's a lot of pitfalls here just out of the gate. And I wanted to make sure, we're coming up. We've got about 10 minutes left here. I wanted to make sure everybody was heard. We got a few questions. Does anybody have any questions right now for Gerry before we move on? I know that there's been a lot of just a lot going on recently, and it's kind of tough to keep up with. But is there anything else that's on your mind that you'd like to share with us right now as we're coming towards the end of our session here?
I think there was one small minor point that I wanted to bring earlier when you were talking about, models, the size of the models. I think there's a school of thought where some people are arguing that the model size may actually get smaller as
Mhm.
we go along. And there are a few data points why people are talking about that. One is that there is a research paper that came up maybe about 6-9 months ago, the chinchilla report, where essentially they evaluated. Essentially, what they were trying to say is that model size, there will come a threshold where because you only have a finite amount of data to be training it, past a certain threshold, your performance is actually not going to be that fantastic anyway. So that there seems to be that theoretical bound of where it is. So that's the first argument on why some people think the models may not get bigger and bigger. But I may be wrong in this, right? With
Uh,
multimodality coming in,
uh-huh.
yeah, it's moved beyond text. So it may get bigger because there's modality coming in.
Mhm.
But if it was just purely based on text, there's an argument that based on the data that you have, there is a theoretical threshold. Second data point is once you have RAG that comes in place, you may not need to try to train a model that has seen every piece of corpus on the internet. You just need it to know enough to be, I mean, in the old days of NLP, we don't try to train on the whole internet. If you are trying to teach it vocabulary and vectors, you do not need the whole internet for that.
Gonna get
Um,
spelling errors is what it's gonna get.
Yeah. So there's that other thing about with the technology such as interfacing into your data source, you may not need to train something so big that tries to remember everything. So that's the second
Wow.
argument. The third one is actually interesting more from I read it, either I read it or I heard it on a podcast because of the EU AI Act that came out. You know that under the scoping of the general purpose AI, there was a petaflops limit of 10 to the 25 that they have
Yeah,
defined.
that's right. That's right. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
anything above 10 to the 25 petaflops for your training
Uh-huh.
qualifies as something which has a high, I forgot the exact wordings they use, as an impact on a systemic risk and
Mhm.
all documentations, proof, evidence needs to be provided. So there was that argument in the podcast I was listening to that because
Mhm.
of that, I think there is now incentive for people to try to go below 10 to the 25. But obviously they do have one clause that says they may revise that number as technology
Yeah,
moves.
that's
Um,
true. Yeah, that's wow. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's really not a major limit to most people. I mean, you really have to be on that cutting edge with the hardware yourself to push that. And or if you came up, and someone had all this money and they wanted to invest in that, then they would be held bound to those regulations, which I can agree with. I love innovation. I love science fiction. I also love staying alive, and I love people to be safe, and I like for things to work more than not, and for those systems to be healthy and maintainable. What a nightmare it must be to deal with such a huge undertaking, right? And then you say, "Oh, I'm just going to make a more is less situation out of it again, and we're going to cut some layers out. We're going to trim this down, and hey, we have this working model that's great and it's explainable. And I think this is wonderful. I mean, things get really blown up in proportions, and then we come back down, and then it fluctuates, and we find places to settle where we've got a really good path out of it and find good support, out of this, in this trend upwards. And it be rational and approachable. So,
Actually, if I may just throw
yeah.
it one more point, I was prior to this, I was deliberating whether I even want to talk about it. I do not want to go into the details. It is probably
Mhm.
not the right forum and the place to get into that. Recent days, if you have been looking at some of the usage of AI, you may have come across this code name Lavender.
Mhm.
Uh, if you have not Google for what lavender is,
Mhm.
it's disturbing how AI can be used in very dystopian ways.
Mhm.
Uh,
Oh, right,
Again,
right.
I do not want to go into the details
Nope.
of this because I don't think it's the right platform for that.
Mhm.
But AI in the wrong usage can can really create a lot of chaos. So I
Yes.
think to your point about innovation is great, but I think there are some red lines that should never be crossed.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, it's just the excitement of seeing it happen. It's like watching a space shuttle launch. It's like, oh, we're all in it together watching this thing happen as Earthlings, and there it goes into space. And it's there is that big juggernaut. There's all these people behind it. There are these teams of scientists that have this put together. All the safety measures are in place, or they work to put those in place, and that's how we gather as humanity. But anytime a smaller party or group of individuals with heavy-handed agendas step into the picture, then all of a sudden these exploits become an attainable form of power and something that can be leveraged against any people, and that's not gonna fly. Not no.
Mhm.
And we are all in this together to ensure that we don't ever get too far down those roads. And community is everything right now, and it always will be. And we can never not have that. We all got here as groups banding together over time, from tribes to countries, here we are. And now it's further everyone's responsibility going forward to just be aware. Just be aware and to spread that, you know, penchant for being aware, and show the world that there are these things that are coming together, and they're it's going to get easier to look at. And hey, we've got these tools, or hey, we have these groups of people working on this, and then here's those results. And it is a new wave of development, and but the more people who are a part of it, the better. And because no one should be left out of that, from localization, okay, in the languages itself, and natural language processing. What is it without all the natural languages? Am I right? And to represent all the cultures, it's going to take empowering everybody out there to do that, to bring the insights as an insider to the rest of the world, from subtle differences in this dialect and subtle, ways of using this word here. And, there are all these things, even within one language, when you start fine tuning a model to use a word a certain way. Like in English, you have words that have an I on the end instead of an S, like apparatuses versus apparati, you know. Um, doing something like that sounds easy, like making a model choose the right way, but you'd be surprised. I helped a really good professor of mine on a problem that was just that, and it took a few days for us to figure out how to go about it. And it's a head scratcher. You're like, well, there's too much mystery here, and since then things have evolved, and it's become more explainable and approachable to pass on to someone else and say, here, you can use this too. And all of a sudden the tool becomes more formidable and more integral and more accessible for everyone to use. And so that's the excitement I'd like to share with people, is that hey, we're growing together, all right, and we all have our insights in this, but we have to be vigilant. We have to do our due diligence. We must stand firm on a lot of these ethical cornerstones, okay, in society, and the foundations that we are building now are going to carry us into the future. They need to be solid foundations. And for everyone who's come out here, I just want to say that this is a roundtable format. Usually a lot more people jump in with questions. I know I'm okay. Let's see. It would be interesting to hear your views on the best approach to AI solutions and cyber risk assessments. That's Yemi again. So, just what can you leave us with on that, Gerry? I know we've covered a lot of ground here, and hey, I'll be here again next week, and we can talk again for sure. But do you have any closing thoughts on your best approach to AI solutions and cyber risk assessments? What do you have for us there?
Mm,
Not an easy answer, is it?
yeah, not easy. Not
Yeah.
too much, not too much that's very mature. And because it's a fairly broad topic, right? Which part of the risk assessments are we looking at? If we are looking at maybe say the risk management portions, then to the point you're mentioning about what's next, I think within IBM they have GRC platforms like Open Pages as well. So that's where the integrations into it. Some other GRC solutions have also invested over the last few years. ServiceNow bought a company 2 years ago. I believe Archer also recently just bought one. So from a risk, if it was the process part of it, then yeah, there are some of these AI solutions that's coming in to reduce that friction, similar to how I've kind of described it. If it is about the testing of the AI systems itself, there are some emerging ones. I don't track them very closely, but quite a few have gotten a lot of great yeah, they are startups and they've gotten good VC backings. One of the ones that I came across was this company called Hidden Layer. Hidden Layer
Oh, yeah.
got substantial funding a few months ago. So there are that category of startups that's really about how do you do the testing of AI models. And there's something in between, which is really about how do you protect the workloads of AI models. And I believe Azure just 2 days ago announced the suite of solutions that they have within their Azure Studio. And there are some companies that does that. So things like think of it a bit like a firewall in the old days, but it's the prompt. I forgot what's the phrase they use for that. So they try to protect against things like prompt injection, protect against
Oh, yeah.
even if your jailbreak prompt worked, the data would come out because there is that other layer that's blocking it. So there's a suite of solutions that allows you to put into part of your overall solutions to safeguard against some of those injections and usage abuse that's there. So broadly, I think three big categories. I have not really gone into details of most of them, except the GRC part that I'm a bit more familiar with. Then there are some which are really around those two other areas. So I
Yeah.
hope that
That's
helps. It will be a
mhm.
developing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that helps though. No, that is good to know. That's great. I love the idea of testing, companies coming up just to help with testing and verifying. And I think that's essential. I mean, this is like, it's like having in mechanical terms for cars, it's like taking something to the dyno and having it tested for its RPMs, or having shops and like all of a sudden, oh, okay, I gotta go take my LLM in for an inspection, I've got
Yeah.
quite a bit to verify here. We're going on quite the road trip. But anyways, that's great news. And I mean, if anything, we've got a lot of silver linings here, a lot more sunshine than some people may have expected. And because there are rational and sane approaches to getting this done, and to understand what we're working with and how to wait, or excuse me, how to really derive value and consistent results, and how we get there is going to be a lot of reporting and testing and checking back in with all the communities to see, what tools are working best. Because hey, this is a science, but it's a growing science. And it may be a lot like, bug testing, but it's a different type. It is a different type of bug testing and debugging that we're looking at here. So it's not as straightforward as normal code, but it is every bit as much built on normal code. So, but anyways, so look, Gerry, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's already 1 a.m. for you out there. Uh, and I know that you need to get some rest probably, but I can't thank you enough. This was really a pleasure. It was exciting to know we had this in the works for so many months, and I'm just so happy to be able to share this with the world and help bridge that divide with people out there with knowledge and know-how, and just good insights in the hope of doing things right later, with actual hard work now, and we can get that done. So I can't thank you enough, Gerry. And
Thank you for having me, Dan.
I look forward to talking to you again soon. But until then, you have a wonderful weekend. And to everybody else, thank you for coming and thanks for watching. And we'll be with you next week. This has been the AI Think Tank podcast. I'm Dan Wilson, and I'll see you all again later. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.